James Melendez, James All About Business. Today's topic is a Chief of Staff study that I did regarding salary. So this is a 2023 USA salary study. Stay tuned. So before I get started, please be sure to give a like and subscribe to this channel. This is only for newly minted, newly created, or perhaps backfill roles for Chief of Staff of an organization. And so we're going to talk about what is that Chief of Staff salary for newly minted, newly created Chief of Staff roles. I looked at Chief of Staff postings on LinkedIn, Glassdoor, Indeed, Google, and other sites from May to June of 2023. I found 302 Chief of Staff roles. Now, I do believe this represents about 95% of all newly created or backfilled Chief of Staff roles. Now, this is not a surprise in many ways. Where are the Chief of Staff roles being posted from? Where the company's based. So we're talking about where the companies are based, not necessarily where the jobs are going to be completed, though it is quite likely that many of these jobs are going to be located in these orange circles here. And that's West Coast United States and the Northeast of the US. And laggards are really the mountain states and Midwest, which is surprising. I expected to see much more in Chicago and many more in Austin. This is a surprise to me. And there are laggard industries, right? There are some industries that don't believe in this role type. And so I do think over time, more organizations are going to be picking up more Chief of Staff roles because they are required. They are needed to support the leadership teams, not just the C-suite leaders, but leadership teams below that as well. So I do think this will expand at some point in the future. Now, you're going to ask the question, where are the work locations? They're, a mix of this. There's no one predominant type. And so there's really no overwhelmingly large number that is really the driver on this. I would have thought more of these are going to be on site. That is not necessarily true. And so I find that to be interesting. I do think over time, this particular mode will be wherever the executive, where she or he wants to live. And that may not be where the company is quartered either. So if a global head or chief executive lives in Casper, Wyoming, most likely they're not going to require their Chief of Staff to live in Casper, Wyoming. It's not realistic. So ultimately, to find talent is where the talent lives. And I do think at some point, hybrid and remote will probably have the highest portion, and on-site will have the least. There's a lot of Chief of Staff titles that I didn't quite expect. I definitely expected to see junior and senior Chief of Staff roles, and I definitely expected to see quite a number of director and Chief of Staff or combo title roles, VP and Chief of Staff. So an organization might call it a program director, might call it a senior management advisor. There's no parenthetical, there's no / saying that senior management advisor dash or / Chief of Staff. It just says senior management advisor. So if you do not know in that organization what a senior management advisor does, you might be missing out on that opportunity, and that's unfortunate. And I have had a role title myself where my role title did not match the role that I was doing. And especially a very large and bureaucratic organization, they're impossible to change. I do find it to be problematic when an organization doesn't list, even on a parenthetical, the program director, parenthetical Chief of Staff is that particular role. Because what happens is that many people who could apply for that, who should be applying for those roles, don't, because they don't know that a program director at a specific organization is a Chief of Staff role. So you're going to see additional titles associated with that, such as associate, assistant, and junior, which I do find problematic as well. Why I find that problematic is simply, is an assistant Chief of Staff an entry-level role that they are actually going through a potential career to being a Chief of Staff, or do they actually assist a Chief of Staff, a regular Chief of Staff or senior Chief of Staff? That is unclear, especially if you read the job descriptions. I did see two specific roles, one paying a very low range, that is, the range is 146 to 150, representing 4,000. There was one particular role that's paying 107 to 284,000, which represents $177,000, but the average is $94,794. Now, what drives a salary range are several factors. That is location. If you are an on-site Chief of Staff and you are doing a role in New York City or San Francisco or DC, you might have a higher pay range. Now, you're going to ask about roles that are remote. I do think that there is a variance there as well, but obviously no one's going to build into the pricing of that particular role based on location if it is remote. It would not make any sense at all. I do know of organizations who have tried to pay down someone who might be, say, in Billings, Montana versus San Francisco, but I think that's not in anyone's best interest because talent is talent. And I would say for a good chief of staff, it's a rarefied talent. There's not a lot of good chief of staffs that are available at any given time in the marketplace for any specific role. There's also experience. Also, there's a lot of specialized knowledge that's required for a role. And then lastly, what was the previous salary? So I do think organizations try to pay at least premium above the previous chief of staff role if possible. The salary that you're going to get is what you negotiate. And I think that's important to do as much as you can because ultimately you're going to be locked into that. And while you might have a bonus or you can have equity, you're going to be doing a lot of work. Build in that pricing where logical, where possible. Don't price yourself out of a role if you really want that role. Some COSs that I know have taken a role at a much lower pay range or pay rate, and that was something that they wish they had not done based on what they learned from doing that role. So it is obviously your decision to accept a particular salary or not. And it's also, armed with a lot more knowledge that you're able to ask for that particular range or particular salary target. That's very important to do and to negotiate that. Now, the average chief of staff salary in my study is $289,975, a very shocking range of $50,000 to $380,000. So it's a very large variance here, $50,000 to $380,000. I'm not sure at $50,000. Reading the job description, and first of all, at a $50,000, I've read a number of $60,000, $70,000, and I would say they're actually poorly written job descriptions. And it's not really, I didn't understand what that person would actually be doing. The salary compensation analyst didn't understand this particular job, doesn't understand the market, and really giving a very low ball number. So these are not nonprofit organizations for the lowest paying salaries. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And I would say that I would not take a role at that number. Now, my number is not that far off from, say, salary.com, which they're posting $286,481. Now, this does not tell me time range. Is this for the past year, 2 years? Is it a similar time scope that we're both looking at? Because the numbers are very, very similar. So I definitely am aware that chief of staffs are not necessarily paying $289,975 for somebody that's been in the role, say, in the past 5 years. I would suspect that number is much lower. Also, remember, this is an average. This does not mean that just because you're going to apply for a job, you're going to get that number. It also means that you're going to have to negotiate, obviously, your salary, as I talked about before, and you may have no ability to have any negotiation whatsoever. So I just copy and pasted each of these particular required experiences. I couldn't imagine writing some of these up anyway. An MBA with a bachelor's in STEM, 5 years of management consulting, which really translates to McKinsey or Bain & Company or PwC or whatever organization that might be. So 2 years of a logarithm experience. Who has a medical degree or PhD degree? And here's a very interesting one, 12 years of experience in chief of staff, business planning, strategy, operations role, operations related role in a SaaS organization. And so these are something that are unicorns in my opinion. And let's talk about this number. Let's go back to this number, $289,975. And you're asking somebody to have a medical or PhD, and you want them to have all this experience of 12 years or 5 years or 10 years. I don't think those people truly would do that role because maybe they're a director or a VP or senior VP. They have that experience, but they're not going to apply for this job. They're going to continue their role in their specific scope of work. Perhaps they're in operations, they're in finance, they are in engineering, and so they're going to stay in those roles. They're not going to actually be these candidates. There's very, very few people who have that experience who actually go for that salary rate because they're making more money. So some of these actually just don't make any sense at all. And so again, I would wonder in terms of comp analysts that they don't truly understand what they're asking for and actually comparing that against specific roles that these people might be in. Maybe they're doing a career change and they really would go for a lower salary, but that's far and few between. Somebody's going to really want to maximize their particular earning potential, they are going to really probably not take the role because the pay is so low. So you can ask for a lot of things, you can require a lot of things, and that doesn't mean you're going to get that. What you're asking for is a unicorn, and these candidates just simply don't exist. Sometimes a chief of staff role job description reads more like a specialist analyst role. Is that what you really need? So as somebody who might be hiring for this role, you're a chief executive or you're a global head of an organization and you want to make sure you have the right person, make sure you write the job description in a way that is really leaning towards a chief of staff. And perhaps it's an examination. Do you need a chief of staff or do you need a specific analyst role for that position to support you in your role? Or do you really need a chief of staff? And again, I'm going to point to the third bullet point here, which is some of these read as an executive assistant. Now, I do believe that an executive assistant and chief of staff are two specific FTEs. I do believe some organizations try to really, quote unquote, economize and have a two-person or two FTE role in one role. And I don't think that's fair to the leader or the leadership team, because you're going to get one of those particular roles and they're going to do it quite well, but they're not going to do both. They might do the other second role at a maybe 1/4 level. I see this actually quite often, to schedule, to do travel, to do expense reports. Do you really want that high-powered, expensive person to do that for you at $289,000? And oh, by the way, you can't get that person to do the strategic work that you need them to do. You know, if you're hiring for this role, think about that. What do you really want and need? And do know that you're going to get in a combo role. If you do that, you're going to get a lean in on one of the roles versus the other role. While they're very important to get both of these completed for your organization, for yourself, and for your team, you may not be getting what you really need. And also, if you're an applicant for these roles, is that what you really want to be doing? Do you really want a unicorn or do you really want a talented person? Because I think it's really important to get a talented individual. You will not get them to do all the things you need them to do, write algorithms, speak 4 languages, and also, be that supportive person. Because if they could do that, then they might be in another role and actually prefer that other role. Now, here's the new COS role by sector. SaaS is the #1 hiring sector for this particular role, followed by healthcare and education. I was completely surprised by not necessarily SaaS, but definitely healthcare and education. Now, there are laggard industries, laggard sectors such as energy, pharma, financial services, and media. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to be like that. And there are definitely roles, chief of staff roles in those sectors. More organizations that have a chief of staff today will actually be requesting more chief of staff roles in the future. I definitely expect that to happen. Let me know how I can help you or your organization. Let's connect on LinkedIn. So just send me a note. Be sure to subscribe to this channel. Please give a like, and thank you for watching. I do appreciate it.